The White Mistress's Whip. Louisiana, 1858. The Beaumont plantation stood far from the nearest town, surrounded by endless cotton fields and thick southern heat that seemed to suffocate everything beneath it. To outsiders, it looked powerful and wealthy, the kind of estate people admired from a distance. But behind the white columns of the mansion and the polished dinners held beneath candlelight, fear ruled every corner of the land. And at the center of it all stood Evelyn Beaumont. She had once been admired across New Orleans society for her beauty, elegance, and sharp intelligence. Men respected her husband, Richard Beaumont, for his wealth, but many quietly believed Evelyn was the stronger force. She managed the estate with discipline and expected absolute obedience from everyone around her. Nothing escaped her attention. For years, she maintained the image of the perfect Southern wife. But beneath her calm appearance lived a woman consumed by bitterness and suspicion. Richard spent more time away from her each passing year, drinking heavily, disappearing for nights, and returning with the smell of perfume and whiskey clinging to his clothes. Then Evelyn discovered Clara. Clara was young, quiet, and worked inside the main house rather than in the fields. Unlike many others on the plantation, she could read and write, something Richard himself had secretly taught her years earlier. She carried herself differently, with a calm dignity that Evelyn immediately noticed. At first, the rumors seemed impossible. But whispers among the servants grew louder. Richard's late-night visits to the servants' quarters became impossible to ignore. Small gifts began appearing in Clara's room, fine fabric, jewelry, books no enslaved woman should have possessed. Evelyn said nothing publicly. That silence frightened people more than anger ever could. One evening during dinner, Richard casually mentioned Clara's name while discussing household matters. Evelyn's expression did not change, but the room itself seemed to grow colder. After dinner, she walked alone through the mansion, hearing distant thunder outside as rain began falling over the plantation. Her mind replayed every rumor, every glance, every moment she had ignored. Humiliation burned deeper than rage. By morning, the atmosphere across the plantation had shifted. Servants moved carefully, avoiding eye contact. Overseers spoke in whispers. Everyone sensed something terrible approaching. Evelyn summoned Clara to the main house. The young woman entered quietly, her hands trembling despite her attempt to remain composed. Evelyn sat near the large window overlooking the fields, dressed entirely in white. "Do you know why you're here?" Evelyn asked softly. Clara hesitated. "No, Evelyn studied her carefully. Clara was beautiful in a natural, effortless way that made Evelyn's resentment sharpen further. "My husband has shown you kindness," Evelyn said. "Far more kindness than you deserved." Clara lowered her eyes. "I never asked for trouble, That answer only deepened Evelyn's anger. Trouble. As though this humiliation were some unfortunate accident rather than betrayal. 4 days afterward, Evelyn tightened control over every aspect of plantation life. Clara was removed from household duties and forced into exhausting field labor under the burning Louisiana sun. Overseers were instructed to watch her constantly. But punishment did not erase Evelyn's obsession. She watched Clara from windows, from balconies, from horseback rides through the fields. Every glimpse fueled the jealousy eating away inside her. What disturbed Evelyn most was not merely Richard's betrayal. It was the realization that her control over her world was weaker than she believed. And Evelyn Beaumont could not tolerate weakness. One stormy night, Richard returned drunk from town. Their argument echoed through the mansion loudly enough for servants to hear from downstairs. "You embarrass yourself chasing fantasies," Richard snapped. "She made a fool of me," Evelyn replied coldly. "No," he said bitterly. "You did that yourself long ago." The words struck harder than any slap. The next morning, Richard left again, disappearing toward New Orleans for business. Or escape. Without him there, Evelyn's restraint finally collapsed. She ordered Clara brought to the old storage barn near the edge of the property, far from the main house and hidden from outsiders. Several servants were forced to stand nearby as witnesses, not because Evelyn needed help, but because fear spread more effectively when others watched. Clara stood silently, exhausted but defiant in ways Evelyn hated. "You think beauty gives you power?" Evelyn asked. Clara's voice was quiet. "No, But you used it anyway." Rain hammered against the wooden roof as tension filled the barn. Evelyn's fury poured out not only against Clara, but against years of loneliness, betrayal, and bitterness she had buried beneath Southern politeness. This was personal vengeance. And vengeance, once unleashed, rarely stops where intended. In the days after, Clara became increasingly withdrawn. Bruises faded slowly beneath long sleeves, but the emotional scars spread deeper. Word of what happened traveled quietly among both servants and neighboring estates. Even in a brutal system built on fear, many recognized something deeply disturbing in Evelyn's behavior. Richard returned weeks later to discover the plantation changed. Workers avoided the mansion entirely. Servants resigned or disappeared whenever possible. Tension poisoned the estate. When he learned what Evelyn had done, fury exploded between them. "You've turned this house into a graveyard," he shouted. Evelyn faced him without fear. "You destroyed it first." But Richard no longer looked at her with anger alone. He looked at her with something colder. Disgust. Months passed. The Beaumont marriage collapsed into silence and isolation. Richard spent most of his time away from the plantation, while Evelyn wandered the enormous mansion like a ghost trapped inside her own bitterness. Meanwhile, Clara quietly planned her escape. With help from others on the plantation, she fled north one autumn night during heavy rain. By dawn, she was gone. Evelyn searched for her relentlessly at first, sending men across nearby towns and roads. But Clara vanished into the growing network of abolitionist routes leading northward. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Beaumont lost control completely. The Civil War arrived only a few years later. Like many southern plantations, Beaumont eventually fell into ruin. Fields burned. Wealth disappeared. The world Evelyn once ruled collapsed around her piece by piece. By war's end, Richard Beaumont was dead from illness, the plantation abandoned, and slavery itself destroyed. Evelyn remained alone in the decaying mansion long after everyone else had left. Locals claim she still walked the halls dressed in white, staring endlessly toward the empty fields as though waiting for a past that would never return. As for Clara, records later suggested she reached Philadelphia and eventually married a freed laborer, building a quiet life far from Louisiana. She rarely spoke about Beaumont Plantation. But those who knew her noticed one thing. Even decades later, whenever thunderstorms rolled across the sky, Clara would fall silent for a long time, listening to the rain with distant eyes, remembering a place where cruelty wore silk dresses and called itself civilization.